Look at this over here. Look over here, buddy. Look. Ooh, look at this thing.
Yeah, but I can't. I'm not near it. I'm coming.
I got resources. 400 resources. 419.
Let's begin. In QuiVr, you must kill enemies before they reach a wall. Every time you kill an enemy, points are added around a glowing orb. When this is full up, you will move along a canyon and defend another wall. The main concept of the game is incredibly basic. To eliminate the enemies, you are armed with a bow and arrow. To grab a new arrow, you must actually reach and grab one from the QuiVr on your back. The arrow detection is a bit off from your back though, and you will likely find yourself reaching near your ear to grab another arrow. Although it's not realistic, it's actually for better, as you can shoot arrows a bit quicker, and that little less arm movement helps to prevent them from aching more quickly after long play sessions. You can play the game seated, although a few times I did have trouble getting my height correct in the game, and had to restart it a few times. It's a shame that there isn't a height adjuster slider in the options menu. You can also have your QuiVr attached to your waist, but you will have to play while standing to reach it. The game does only use snap turning. I didn't find it a massive issue when playing, although when you first start playing, the motion blur effect after each time you turn is very noticeable. The more I played, the more I got used to it, but I must admit, it would have been a lot better without it. When pulling back an arrow, you will straight away realise the slight rumble coming from the move controller, and the feedback just feels great, as it represents the friction from the arrow on the bow. Sound wise, it immerses you too. As you would expect, the further you pull back the arrow, the further it will travel when launched, and if you pull it all the way back and hold it there momentarily, you will send out a more powerful shot that not only soars through the air in more of a straight line, but can also do quite a bit more damage to the enemies. As well as the bow and arrow, you also have a bomb you can throw. Most of the time, it went exactly where I wanted it to, but there were a few times when it didn't. This ability does need to recharge over time. For the most part, the bow and arrow mechanics do work quite well. The main problems you will face though is when you're either trying to shoot really far downwards or really far upwards, as you will likely face move controller tracking issues. Luckily, around each canyon are teleporters. Simply shooting one of these transports you to that location. So if the enemy is up high, you can teleport up there to make them become level with you, which obviously helps with the tracking issues. This is a game that absolutely requires practice and skill, as the hit detection on the enemies is spot on. So much in fact that your arrows can actually go in between enemies' legs. This difficulty is absolutely welcomed. If it wasn't here, the game would quite honestly be pretty boring, but the fact that it forces you to get good gives you something to aim towards on each playthrough, and each time you really do feel your skills increasing. New enemy types show themselves after you travel to new walls. Smaller enemies only require a quick launched arrow to kill in one shot, whilst other larger enemies require quite a few, which makes a hell powerful arrow shot the better attack option. Some enemies have armour on and some hold shields. A powered up shot will destroy the shield, so having a quick glance and making a mental note of what enemy is coming up next allows you to be prepared for what type of shot to use next, which ultimately increases your speed of damage dealt. Enemies' movement patterns also ramp up the difficulty. Some obviously just move normally, but some teleport forward after being shot once. These obviously demand your full attention, as they can quickly reach your wall you're trying to defend. One of the toughest enemies in the game are the flying ones. They're pretty hard to hit. They do carry bombs though, and if you hit one of these bombs, it's an instant kill. It's very rewarding. It's even more rewarding if you actually kill the enemy and the bombs land on an enemy below. The game makes sure that you don't get into the habit of simply shooting the enemy that is closest to you, thanks to the inclusion of magical enemies who stop in their tracks and form a magical circle around them, which shields enemies that pass through it and also makes them move faster. And some enemies launch bombs towards your gate from far away. This really demands you to be aware of the battlefield at all times, and you will want to be constantly scanning it, as some of the the enemies drop power-ups that change your arrow types, such as a poison cloud arrow type and an electricity arrow, which sets up a rod of electricity momentarily. If enemies destroy your wall, you will move back down the canyon and defend a previous wall again. If you move too many times, it's game over and you have to restart the game. When you reach gate 8, you will be presented a minigame where you must remember where balls are in holders. Upon completion, you are rewarded with either a new item or shards. You can get new things such as bows, arrows, masks and body armor, and they are visually different when you wear them. They also have different abilities, such as a critical hit bonus. If you're feeling daring, you can use your shards to reroll these bonuses. The outcome could make the equipment better or worse, so it's certainly risky. Some of the equipment even comes with different attack powers, such as an arrow that can bounce off one target and hit another. Just like your bombs though, these do need to charge up over time, so waiting for the right moment to use it is the key to success. The game doesn't end after the minigame at gate 8, and continues on to another set of canyons. The difficulty really ramps up here. More of the tougher enemies appear, and they move quicker. The difficulty spike here really is quite off, but it does make the game much more exciting. But it's also the main issue I have with the game, as when you get better equipment, the first 8 gates become incredibly easy to get through, so much so that you'll likely be waiting at the other end of the canyon for enemies to actually spawn. It really is quite tedious, and when you finally reach the 8th gate, only to be hit by a big difficulty spike, the grind just to get back there again is quite off-putting. Up to 4 people can play this game online, and this is really where the game shines. When playing with others, you really need to communicate with each other and discuss strategic positioning, as more enemies are thrown your way. You don't always see exactly what others see though, and these non-consistent visuals are tied to the enemy's physics engines. You do see when an enemy dies, but one person may see them forced into the air from an explosion, whilst the other player just sees them drop to the floor. It just removes some of the shared experience. It's really not a massive issue though, as the game is a blast to play with other people online, and there are stats that show you who is doing best on the team, which always encourages some friendly competitive banter. These stats are displayed at the end of each game, but you can also see them whilst you're actually in a canyon, by turning your bow over. Your wrist has to be bent when you do this though, and it's an incredibly awkward position. Each week the high scoreboard is erased and a new one is presented, but the actual scoring is not done in the best possible way. There is one tied to single player and then multiplayer, but the multiplayer one doesn't take into account how many people was playing, so a 2-player high score can be up against a 4-player one. Sure, the enemy's numbers do increase the more people who play, but it's still an unfair scoring system. There's also a practice area and a target range that comes with its own scoreboard, but I doubt these additions will hold your attention for too long. Graphically, the game isn't the best, but it's certainly not the worst either. The canyons are randomly generated, some are green with trees, and some are cold and icy. There's even one where you go through a cave, so there is a bit of fun when seeing what you will be presented with on each new run. Although some of the canyons can look extremely similar to one another when they're in the same style, it does create some confusing moments. There is one area in the game though, which is just awful. The textures here are absolutely terrible, and it's just very out of place. It's a shame that this is even in the game. This is obviously a game all about replayability and getting better over time, so there really isn't a completion time. I can't show the game's trophies as they're not online yet, but I will leave a comment below the video when I know more about them. This game is incredibly basic, but because of how precise you have to be with your aiming, it makes for quite a rewarding and addictive experience. For the first few hours at least, as when you have a few new pieces of equipment, the first part of the game becomes extremely tedious. It really is the only thing that is making me not want to return as often as I would really like to. That being said, the multiplayer is still a lot of fun. It's certainly a game where you can quickly chuck it on to have a round or two with friends, and I do plan on returning to it every now and then. The fact that the leaderboards are erased each week gives you an incentive to do so too, as long as you're the competitive type. Overall, it's a bit of a mixed bag, as there's certainly some balancing issues here and there when it comes to keeping the player engaged, but I must admit, playing with friends is a lot of fun and is the best bit about the game. I really don't suggest that you get it though, if you plan on playing only the single player mode. If you like skillful games, then this should keep you entertained, especially in the multiplayer, but for a game that is all about repetition, it's a shame that the more you play, the less you feel like saying, just one more attempt. Say goodbye, Kieran.
Bye, Kieran.
I'm here. Behind you. Bye.
So yeah.
If you want to take a look at some online gameplay, there is a video on screen right now where I'm joined by the Aussie known as Kangaroo Kieran. He's quite well known in the Outback. It's just a shame his fame doesn't come from his QuiVr aiming skills. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more PSVR content.